Friends, good evening and welcome to the PG Track program of Delhi CSI, the webinar 74th. And today we are again talking about the basics of cardiology, the clinical examinations. We have had a session on the cardinal symptoms of cardiology. We also had sessions on pulse, on JVP. We had a basic approach to chest exercise in cardiology. We'll be talking about sounds in the next other sessions, but now we have two consecutive sessions on very relevant part, which is approach to cardiac murmurs. And to discuss the nuances, the details of the cardiac murmurs, we have our dear friend, Dr. Ranjan Shetty, who is head of the Department of Cardiology at Manipal Hospitals, Bangalore. So it's my great pleasure to invite Dr. Ranjan. And along with me, my dear friend, Dr. Girish, Professor of Cardiology, Professor Sumut Kurian, Professor of Cardiology, and Dr. Nitish Nayak, who is also Professor of Cardiology at All India Institute of Medical Sciences. So over to you, Dr. Ranjan. In case you guys have any questions and comments, please feel free to communicate it to us in the chat box, and we'll be happy to answer all these questions in the end. So over to you, Dr. Ranjan. Please start the session.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Mohit. It's always a pleasure to be part of Delhi CSI's program. It's a very novel approach, and I'm happy to be part of it. So today we are going to talk about approach to cardiac murmur and how to identify, how to make sense out of it. So this is something which people keep talking about, from the first year of MBBS. I think the day we joined, we want to hear murmur and we want to understand murmur. Something about murmur, the errors and mistakes, these are something which will be going through it. Maybe we need probably 2 lectures to do it completely. So what I'll do is, once I realize that we are a little tired, we could probably stop and then restart later. So what's a murmur? It's a relatively prolonged series of auditory vibration. For example, if you have a narrow series, then it will actually be called a sound. If it is the same sound, if it is longer, that becomes a murmur. But what is also important is the way you present it. If you can tell the timing, intensity, frequency, quality, the way it looks, and the radiation, all these put together makes a murmur. If your examiner has to stop you, the examiner has to ask you, what about radiation, what about quality, what about how is the pitch and things like that, then it's not right, because then you're not done your work good. The discussion should be after you completely describe the murmur. Now, there are many factors which affect auscultation of the murmur. Palpation also is equally important. That's called trill, and we'll come to that whenever appropriate. So, in an obese patient, if there are, it becomes difficult to auscultate a murmur, but it's easy with a lean individual. Now, to auscultate the murmur, we should know the proper area. All of us know this. Apex becomes technically a mitral area, which is very important. But what is also important is sometimes, for example, MR murmur will always be there in the cardiac apex. But associated MS murmur may not be in the apex. It will actually be in the usual apex, which is 5th intercostal space. So make sure that just because you get an MR murmur, which is now in 7th or 8th intercostal place, the MDM of the mitral stenosis, either functional or organic, typically is not at the apex, but at its usual area. That's also the area where you most of the time get opening snap. You don't get it in the displaced apex. The lower sternum becomes the tricuspid valve. We know it very well. Murmur in the pulmonary area is again, we know the PS probably is one of the loudest murmur. Aorta, there are 2 areas. One is the traditional aortic area, which is right 2nd intercostal space, and second is the herbs area, which is left 3rd intercostal space. There are, the different reasons. The same murmur best heard in one particular position actually changes the diagnosis. Should also realize that your exam is more like rapid fire. People are going to ask a lot of questions. They will not have too much patience to listen to you. So they're going to go it, little quickly. And it's always, how do you distinguish a functional TR with organic TR? How do you distinguish the functional MR with the organic MR, MS, PR, high pressure, low pressure? So these are some traditional questions which will definitely be asked. Now, when you describe a murmur, the first thing is position in cardiac cycle. It's important. That means is it systolic or diastolic? You would have realized that as MBBS student, probably this is the most common error you have done, or this is something which people tend to do, and it looks very, it becomes difficult. So it's very important to position. Sight, we already discussed. Intensity, that is about loudness, but don't mistake loudness for severity. For example, in most systolic murmurs, the loud ones may not be severe, but in diastolic, the loud are severe. For example, in MS, a loud MDM is actually a severe MDM, whereas in MR, a loud MR doesn't mean severe. It could actually be, even the softer MR could be severe. That's just because of the pressure difference between the two chambers. In MR, the LV to LV and LA gradient is present even in mild MR. Mild MRs also are pansystolic. Mild MRs are also loud. So do not correlate intensity with severity. All of you know about VSD. Louder the VSD actually is the less severe. Quality and pitch, that is something which again people discuss a lot. High pitch, low pitch. What does it mean? So typically, as one person once quoted, the murmur is like your friend's motorcycle. You hear that sound and it is that motorcycle. So that means to tell that whether it is high pitch, low pitch, sometimes is difficult, but you can still recognize that sound. So for you to understand murmur, the only way to do it is auscultate enough. For example, a simple example like MR, TR, and VSD. Let's look at MR and VSD. Description wise, both are pansystolic, both are high pitch, description wise. But anybody who has auscultated these two actually knows they're not the same. MR murmur is a pure high tone. So that pure high tone is, once you keep that whoosh kind of sound, what you get, that is what is MR murmur. But a VSD description wise fits exactly same, but it's a different murmur because there is a component of medium pitch. It's not a low pitch. There is a component of medium pitch which makes it unpure, more harsh. More harshness is actually a low feature of low frequency or low pitch, whereas pure high tones like AR, MR, they give you the feeling that they are uniform and single. Radiation is second best. The best is where it is found. Say radiation is second best. There are people who use conduction instead of radiation, but probably the more accepted term will be radiation. So that means apical murmur radiate to the lateral part. The murmurs which are there in aortic area radiate to carotid. That means best is here. Radiation is next best. I'm sure sometime you are confused. For example, apex. MR murmur could be very loud. You don't know whether it is just conducting everywhere or radiating. So the way to look at it is apex, auscultate into area which is 5 centimeter lateral or 5 centimeter medial. If the 5 centimeter lateral, which is now axilla, is as loud as apex or just less loud, whereas here, as you go away from the site, if the intensity starts coming down, then it is radiation. Radiation means a selective propagation. It is second best. What people also forget is dynamic changes. It's very, very important after this to have dynamic changes. Now, once you know systole, diastole, it's also important to time it in systole, diastole. Now, how do we do systole or diastole? So what helps is, as we discussed in JVP, as we discussed in many other class, with and without helps best. It is not pre, before, after. It is more with and without. So systole comes with apex or with carotid. Diastole comes without apex or without carotid. Don't think of S1, S2 and things like that. Just stick to apex. So apex is easily palpable most of the time. If murmur comes with that, it is systolic. If murmur comes without that, it is diastolic. So that is how we classify it into systolic and diastolic. In systolic, there are early systolic murmurs. Most ejection murmurs are mid-systolic, but do not call them ejection. It's better to describe them as mid-systolic. There are late systolic murmurs. There are what we call as fan or hollow systolic. Again, diastolic murmurs could be early diastolic, mid diastolic, or we don't call it late diastolic, we call it pre-systolic. And these are some classical examples. Systolic murmur at apex MR, diastolic is MS and flow murmur, but as I said, this will usually be medial to the displaced apex or in fifth intercostal space. Left lower sternum will be TR and VSD, and continuous murmur, that's a different chapter by itself. I think we should discuss it at some point about continuous murmur, but right now, today, let's stick to systolic and diastolic. Now about grading. Grading means about intensity. But believe me, this is overrated. It's Freeman-Levin grading, but it's overrated. As we discussed, in systolic murmur, the intensity may or may not indicate severity. Most of the time, it is the other way. The diastolic is only graded till 4, but diastolic murmur most of the time are harsher, the louder the murmur are likely to be severe. In systole, it usually doesn't correlate well, but you need to grade. So understand the grading, which is important. Thrill anywhere actually makes it grade 4. Like if you have a carotid thrill and you have a thrill here, it makes it grade 4. But it's definitely overrated. Now let's spend some time on quality and pitch. Traditionally we only classify as low and high pitch, but there is also medium pitch. So low pitch is rough rumbling. It's harsher and it is best heard in diaphragm, bell, whereas high pitch is actually MR and AR murmur. The VSD and AS are more medium pitch, so they're in between pitch. We can feel the in between pitch. So more the gradient between two chambers, the higher is the pitch. So that is the determinant of the pitch. The second determinant of which is actually the flow. Higher the flow, higher is the pitch. So these are the determinant. One of the most common error, which probably the medical student do, is actually, so-called intermediate auscultation. That means you're taking, nowadays you get strength which are only diaphragm, you don't have bell. It's okay to have it, or you have bell and diaphragm. The first one, when you're palpating or when you're auscultating, it has to be multi-level, it has to be multi-step. The first level is just to keep it in the apex and keep it very light, very light, as if it is just touching. Take the bell or the strength with only diaphragm, keep it very light. When you do that, you hear both high pitch and low pitch. So MS murmur will be best heard, S3 will be heard, S4 will be heard. Then at the same area, press it very hard, like, significant pressure. When you do that, all the low pitch disappears and only the high pitch persists. That means if there is MSMR, initially you're hearing MS very well, MDM, you're also hearing some MR pan system. But when you press, complete disappearance of S3, S4, and the MDM occurs. So when you do this properly, you will never miss a S3 or S4. So please, do this. Don't do intermediate. Most of the time, the steps is just kept there, and you don't know whether you're using it like a bell or a diaphragm, because both can be used as both. You use a bell, press it hard, it becomes a diaphragm. Use a diaphragm, keep it light, it becomes a bell. So that's how they work. Yes, in exam to do drama and show, you may have to make all the drama which you do, but for you to really pick up the murmur, you need to auscultate it very, very properly. Either you're using a stet as a bell, or you're using the stet as a diaphragm. So once you do that, half the problems are gone. So whether it's low pitch, high pitch. Once you do that, other half is also gone, because systole, diastole. Now the thrill, which is very, very interesting and we should not miss. Again, it's one palpation also. The first time when you palpate for thrill, S3, S4, your hand should be very, very light. It should be, as if you're just touching. Go to apex, just keep this one, it is just touching. Only when you press hard, you realize you're actually palpating more S1, and S3, S4 disappears. All those thrills, which are actually more of low frequency, low pitch things, are better palpated. That's why you get thrill most of the time in MS. You could also get thrill in VSD and AS because they are medium pitch. But pure high pitch like MR and AR, you rarely get thrill. So thrill is also a feature of a low pitch thing most of the time, but never high pitch. Now, conduction and radiation, we did discuss this. So MR radiates to axilla, AS radiates to carotid. Radiation is the second best. Conduction is from equipoint. Sometimes loud murmurs are heard everywhere, but they fade away like a circle. If you draw 2 points, 5 centimeter up, 5 centimeter below, if the both are of similar intensity, it's conduction, like heat conducting. Radiation is the selective propagation. So that's important. Now, classification of the murmur, we did go to this. They are classified as systolic, diastolic, or continuous murmur. Now, let's look at systolic murmur now. So, systolic murmur, whatever is left-sided also is right-sided. As I told, for AS and PS, use the term mid-systolic. Do not use ejection system. Ejection means the process of generation. But you're just hearing the murmur and you're just timing it with the cycle. So use the term ejection systolic murmur. Hollow systolic obviously is MR and TR. So it's also important, as you keep auscultating, you realize you can make out the murmur going up and down, like crescendo, decrescendo. You can make it out as you keep hearing, but it's more like your friend's motorcycle, as I keep saying that. So it's like at least 100 cases of MR you need to auscultate, at least 100 of MS, 100 of AS, then you don't get confused. Otherwise, initially everything seems to be confusing. And also, just to go back, auscultation is the last step. Never auscultate without palpating. Palpation, apex, S3, parasternal heave are very, very important. Make a physiological diagnosis. Use auscultation like an investigation, like you're confirming your finding. If you just randomly keep your strength, you're likely to be wrong most of the time. Now, early systolic murmur and late systolic murmur also have their example. So let's look at mid-systolic murmur, which are very common, could be physiological, could be pathological. They have gap between S1. There are 5 reasons. One is ventricular outflow. We all know that. Dilatation of the great arteries also produces just an increased flow across great artery. In children, innocent murmur, and some forms of MR also could present with mid-systolic murmur. Now, if you look at ventricular outflow, this one, if you look at the cardiac cycle, there is isovolumetric contraction, there is isovolumetric relaxation. So murmur starts after isovolumetric contraction and it has to stop before isovolumetric relaxation. So timing wise, it is in the mid-systole, and that's why you get a murmur. Now, AS murmur, there is a gap between S1 and S2 and the murmur occurs. So let's discuss a little bit about AS. One, like the last class, there is a parvus et al. There is all of them hemodynamically correlate. Typically, for a significant AS, there has to be apicocarotid delay. We know the delay is 30 minutes. For a significant AS, there is almost always an apicocarotid delay. Murmur ends way before this, and there is a. It's also important to know that when you describe the murmur of AS, the length determines the severity, intensity not so much, the length and the delayed peak. Moment you have delayed peak, so it's a crescendo, decrescendo, delayed peak. If you have delayed peak, it should be shown in carotid. So you will have a apicocarotid delay. You could also have a tardus pulse or an anacrotic pulse. The volume also is low, it becomes parvus et tardus. Otherwise, it is tardus anacrotic pulse. Now, what is also important is to look at the, usually a significant AS is a LVOTO, and almost all the time there is a paradoxical split. So please look for paradoxical splits, otherwise you'll miss. So mild AS will have just a mid-systolic, a severe AS will have a much longer murmur with more delayed peaking, and a very severe AS invariably has S4 if they are in sinus rhythm, and a paradoxical split. Now, this is again asked, Gallawardine phenomena. So Gallawardine phenomena means selective propagation of high pitch component of aortic murmur to apex. That's the selective propagation of high pitch content. That is Gallowardine phenomena. Now, how do you distinguish? This is very classical. One, it occurs in sclerodegenerative or calcific AS. So not in rheumatic AS in young person. It occurs in older individuals. So age has to be at least 65 plus for you to get it. There has to be a lot of calcium. The other thing, it feels like MR, means it is pure high pitch. But the timing wise, it is still mid systolic. You can hear S1 properly, you can hear S2. It's not an ejection systolic. I mean, in the sense, it's not a pan systolic, but it's still a mid systolic. So clear S1, clear S2. Now it's an outflow murmur change in AF. They also change if there is an ectopic because there is more ejection at that time. So this changes and MR doesn't change. But in my opinion, the most important thing is that, it's still a mid-systolic murmur and not a pan-systolic murmur. And rest of the points, you should know it very well. So AS typically has post-extrasystolic enhancement. Longer the pause, more ejection and more announcement is AS. The next question which is asked in AS is, how do you distinguish a valvular, supravalvular and subvalvular AS? Very important again, a supravalvular has what we call as, one is the site of murmur, best in the right sternoclavicular, second AS is in best in the right second, and in Erb's area is subvalvular. Thrill depends on the same site. Supravalvular has conda effect, that means preferential transferring of blood to the right side. Usually right left, to have a conda effect, the BP difference should be more than 30 millimeter. But a brisk right carotid, a delayed left carotid is a characteristic of supravalvular. And they almost never have aortic regurgitation. Now, valvular in a younger patient has click, radiation to carotid, may have AR, best in the right in second intercostal phase. The subvalvular, we are talking about fixed subvalvular. We are not talking about HOCM here. A fixed subvalvular is a membrane or a tunnel. Invariably, the murmur is in left third intercostal space, hardly ever radiates to carotid, but AR is very classical. So you should not diagnose a subvalvular without AR. It's because of the constant hitting which happens. What is common to all this? LV apex is common, pressure overloaded, not much cardiomegaly. S4 is very common. Ejection or mid-systolic murmur is common. Longer the murmur, more severe the lesion, and a paradoxical split is common. So this much is, and a low systolic BP most of the time is common. You could have apicocarotid delay in all of them except in supravalvular. Right may not have it, left will have it. So these are the common features. So whenever those features are there, take them as LVOT. Don't call it AS, call it LVOT. And then come back to these features and diagnose the level of LVOT. That is what we need to do. Now, HOCM, on the other hand, is entirely different. Probably defies cardiology because this and MVP do exactly opposite of what almost all other leave. So anything which increases contractility, decreases volume, decreases the aortic impedance, actually increases the murmur. Dynamicity goes up. So that's what we need to understand. But compared to, as we discussed, subvalvular fixed almost always has AR. HOCM rarely has AR. It has MR. MR is much more common, but AR is not common. So, and the carotids are very brisk here. What are the other causes of mid-systolic murmur? Other causes will be ASD with flow in pulmonary, AR itself producing the ejection murmur. Now, PS, just like we discussed PS, we need to discuss, the other thing in AS is the second heart sound. Usually there is a paradoxical split. If it is valvular AS, if it is rheumatic, S2 is soft. If it is bicuspid, S2 could vary depending on the aortic diameter because S2 also is decided by the dilated aorta. So S2 could be normal, decreased or loud in a bicuspid AS. But when you talk about PS, invariably, the P2 is softer. It's almost never loud. It's almost always softer. So it's a right-sided murmur. Again, intensity, the more severe, it becomes louder. It's most of the time louder, but more important, it's more longer and it's more decrescendo. There is wide variable P2 which occurs. There is an ejection click which is best heard in expiration, which people will have. Click is obviously a different class altogether, where you need to know vascular click, ejection click, phasic clicks, and no. So here you have a phasic click which is valvular. That means a click which changes with the respiration, best in expiration, but it is valvular. Please read about this, because this is like a short question which you find. The next question which your examiner will ask you is, how do you distinguish a valvular PS with intact septum? Means there is PS, there is no VSD, there may or may not be ASD. How do you distinguish that from a TOF? Important, TOF, the second heart sound is almost always single. Exam, you cannot tell that you heard P2. You need to call it single. Hardly anybody has passed by telling that they've heard two sounds and it is still TOF. The thing about TOF is, here the murmur is longer and longer. As the murmur becomes severe, it becomes longer and longer. It might even engulf A2, and there is a valvular ejection click. Whereas in TOF, it's the other way. In TOF, the murmur becomes shorter and shorter. More severe the PS, than RVOT. It's not just PS, it's RVOT. The murmur is shorter. The child becomes more cyanotic. So more severe, there is more right to left shunt, it is cyanotic. So it's almost, it's not the same. Parasternal heave is hardly ever there. TOF also can have an ejection phasic click, but this ejection click comes because of the dilated aorta, and because there is a right-sided communication to aorta. This is the only aortic click which increases with inspiration. So it's funny. Here you have a pulmonary click which is valvular, which increases with exhalation, and you have in TOF, you have an aortic click which is vascular because of dilated aorta, because of the right-sided communication. It also could be phasic with increases with inspiration. So this is how you have TOF and you have a PS. Physiology murmur, I think everybody knows. It will go still murmur, elderly, sclerosis, innocent murmur, anything, thyrotoxicosis, beriberi, you name it, anywhere the flow is more, even simple fever, pregnancy can produce physiological murmur. So now let's go to pansystolic or so-called holosystolic murmur. So these can happen if there is a continuous pressure gradient throughout the systole. So it's not because of the LVOT or RVOT, they are not outflow, but they are the chambers. So LV to LA or RV to RA or LV to RV, like VSD or AP window or PDA with PH could have a pansystolic murmur. Most classical obviously is the mitral regurgitation, starts with S1, ends with S2, and is pansystolic, radiates to axilla, sometime to the back. So that's what you find. And we keep telling that while auscultating, you do heal. This is probably the one of the purest for murmur you get. And the second one will be the AR murmur. They are very high pitched murmur which radiates. TR, at least the hypertensive TR, is also high pitched. So in MR, the severity is not by murmur, not by intensity. Severity is by cardiomegaly, presence of S3, presence of MDM, and A to P2 gap. If MR is severe, A2 comes early, and hence there is a wide variable split. So these are the things which talk about severity. Now TR, sometimes the patient could have MR and TR. How do you distinguish? Inching method. That means you start with MR, you inch medially, and as you come more medially, the murmur dips and then again increases. Then there is TR. JVP shows signs of TR. Carolus sign, which is inspiratory increase in TR, is seen, and sometimes lifting the leg up. All these features are seen in TR. So hypertensive TR mimics MR as far as murmur is concerned, but generally shows a lot of peripheral sign. VSD is a larger VSD, the murmur is softer. A small VSD could have a very, very loud murmur. So early systolic murmur, there are very few examples. One is acute MR where LV to LA, it's a decrescendo murmur, systolic. It occurs in low pressure TR, acute MR, and a small muscular VSD where it closes with time. So early, the LA pressure goes so high that the LA-LV gradient is gone and the valve could close. That is the cause for early systolic murmur. One very important question which is asked is how do you distinguish an organic TR from a functional TR? Functional TR means hypertensive TR. Hypertensive TR is literally MR except the position and the inspiratory change. Whereas organic TR, if anybody has heard, you'll never forget it. It's a low pitch murmur. That means it is very superficial. It's scratchy. It is like pericardial drum. It's that superficial and scratchy, and you can most of the time thrill is present. It's a decrescendo murmur. It just tapers off because again RA pressure equal to RV. It's not impressive like a functional TR. It is much subtle. Peripheral signs may not be too much. No signs of PH. So this is one more question which is again asked. How do you distinguish this? VSD small muscular again, clear. Now late systolic murmur, the classical exam is MVP because as the volume decreases, the valve prolapses, there is click and then the murmur happens. So you get with the click, you get it. A severe MVP, S1 appears loud because the click is merging with S1 and then you have an ejection systolic murmur. So this is about the systolic murmurs, and we could do a little bit on diastolic murmurs also. So diastolic murmur could again be early diastolic, mid diastolic, or pre-systolic depending on the time. Each of them has the right side and left side which can occur. The early diastolic traditionally, classically is AR. You need to describe that it is decrescendo. Length of the murmur is very, very important here. A mild AR will have a short length. A severe MR could be almost holodiastolic. Please describe the length. I've seen most people not describing at all. Reaching 25%, reaching 60%. This becomes important. Starting with A2 or starting with P2 also is very, very important. Again, thrill is uncommon because there is a huge pressure gradient between aorta and LV. So thrill is uncommon. So acute AR versus chronic AR. Acute AR is actually shorter murmur in a very, very sick patient. They can have S3 because of rapid blood flow, whereas chronic AR has S4. In acute AR, LV-EDP rises and the mitral valve closes. There is a mitral pre-closure. Hence, S4 is uncommon. Chronic AR, LV has enough reason. It has compensated. It is now. Austin Flint can be there in both acute and chronic AR. Now, hypertensive PR or high pressure PR called as Gram-Steele murmur mimics AR, but in right second space. But the AR is in right third space. Left second space is PR and left third place is AR. So very, very close, can be confusing, but look for peripheral sign. And in a rheumatic heart disease, diagnose it as AR because rheumatic is multivalvular. PR is less common, even if you pick. But there are very other physiology like Eisenmenger physiology, PPHN, where you hear the same loud hypertensive murmur, then it is a PR murmur. You can easily distinguish between these two, and it's but this is something which is very importantly asked. Starting with P2, starting with V2, length of the murmur, peripheral sign, these are a PDA PR, a PDA PA which PR that mimics AR because both the system are communicating. So whether you have AR or PR, it becomes same. But all other physiology, PR does not have peripheral sign. This is one more very, very important exam question. High pressure and normal pressure. High pressure PR is a decrescendo, high frequency, immediately P2 and extends features of pH. Whereas normal pressure PR or organic PR is a crescendo decrescendo. Reason being, as soon as the mitral valve, the pulmonary valve closes, there is no pressure gradient between RV and PA. It needs time to build up. As RV goes into isovolumetric relaxation, a gradient develops. So it's practically a MDM. It is crescendo, decrescendo. It is short most of the time, and it is in no signs of pH. And if anybody has auscultated, it's a superficial scratchy sound. You get it in absent pulmonary valve. You will never miss it. Once you have auscultated a low pressure PR, it's very scratchy. It is like, again, like a pericardial rub rather than the murmur. So if you have heard it in post-ops, you hear it. So look for it, and once you find, you don't miss it. Now, mid-diastolic murmur, they have a clear interval between S2. After that, they start. So it is in the middle part and not initial rapid filling part, because there is isovolumetric relaxation, and after that the valve open, only then the mid. So this is a AV valve related murmur. So it can be tricuspid stenosis, it can be mitral stenosis, it can be atrial myxoma, it can also be Austin-Flint murmur and a Carey-Coombe murmur. So flow murmurs can occur in VSD, PDA, and MR and TR. Now, how do you distinguish these two? How do you distinguish those blue-colored ones from black-colored ones? So the flow murmurs, although they are MDM, they are not MS-MDM. Again, you need to auscultate enough. These murmurs are at best at stretch S3. You know how S3 is there? Little longer S3. That's all is these flow murmurs. Whereas MS murmur is a rough lumbering murmur. So usually it's very easy to distinguish a flow murmur of either ASD, which comes on the right side, or VSD PDA, which comes on the left side. They're not the same at all. Description wise, yes, they are MDM and all that, but remember your friend's motorcycle. At the end of it, you should know. Whereas Austin-Flint and MS really match each other. They can be quite confusing, but VSD PDA flow murmur, not so much. So MS murmur, as we discussed, is a mid-diastolic murmur. How do you assess the severity? Longer the murmur, louder the murmur, narrow A to OS gap actually tells us that the MS is severe. Associated lesion always makes it tough. MR augments MS. MS diminishes MR. Same thing is AR. AR augments AS, so you feel it is one level higher, whereas the AS actually blends AR. So usually the stenotic lesion blend the regurgitation, and regurgitation reasons augment. So you should be careful about that. Now TS is similar, but most of the time there is AF. It increases with inspiration, and it's in left. Again, anybody who's auscultated TS murmur, it actually doesn't look like MS. It's more like, if you suspect something like AR in left third space or fourth space, and then you don't get any signs of AR, you have a raised JVP fluffed face, think that you could actually be dealing with TS. So please look for it, don't miss it. PR with normal PA pressure, we already discussed. It is a crescendo, decrescendo murmur, a mid-diastolic murmur. It's also a cause of mid-diastolic murmur. Now, the question which is asked is, how do you distinguish Austin-Flint murmur for MS? Because your exam case is always a multi-system case. It's not a single, it's a multi-system case. So in severe AR, the jet hits the mitral valve flutters, partially closes, and it produces the MDM. So key here is the severe AR which does this. Truly, there are many distinguishers, S1 loud, S1 soft, and cardiomegaly, no cardiomegaly. But truly, if you want to distinguish, hand grip is also not enough. Hand grip increases AR, so should increase Austin-Flint. But unfortunately, hand grip produces tachycardia, which increases the MS. So ideally, you need amyl nitrate. If you give amyl nitrate, then the BP comes down, hence AR comes down, Austin-Flint comes down, but tachycardia and increased venous return increases MS murmur. So obviously you are not given amyl nitrate in exam, so stick to the theoretical difference which is given and understand it. So other difference is, it's a, but abnormal mitral valve, do not think of Austin-Flint. If the mitral valve is abnormal, rheumatic, thick, then fluttering is not that common. It's for normal mitral valve with abnormal aortic valve. That's when you think of Austin Flint. So other mid-diastolic murmurs are caricum murmur, which occurs because of the, because of the thickened valve, which is a sign of acute rheumatic fever, and that is what we need to know. We did discuss about flow murmurs, which can, like ASD, MR, VSD, flow murmur, but these are not rough rumbling like MS. They are shorter, they are medium pitch. They, they are, most of the time there is S3 which precedes. Generally, no opening snap. Thrill is less common, with exception. MR can have thrill with that SDM. But more important, typically, especially in VSD PDA, they are like a stretched S3. It's like absence of silence of diastole. Diastole is supposed to be silent. You hear something. Again, you have to be very careful. It cannot be an intermediate auscultation. This has to be a proper auscultation using the bell, or you have to keep the diaphragm very, very soft. Pre-systolic accentuation or late diastolic or pre-systolic accentuation, it's a hallmark of MS. Most of the time, a significant MS in AF or not in AF will have pre-systolic accentuation. The reason being, in a short cycle, especially, there is blood in LA, there is a gradient across LA and LV, and this goes up. So there is always a gradient. So I think with the so AF or no AF, you will still have a pre-systolic accentuation. And with this, we can stop, Dr. Mohit, right? Yeah.
So, Girish, are you there? Yeah. Thank you,
I'm
Dr.
there.
Yeah. So this was a very simple and a lucid illustration of the approach to cardiac murmurs. And, these are commonly asked things. You are asked to classify, grade the murmurs. You're also asked which are the question that is asked is which is the typical mid-systolic murmur, which are typical ejection systolic murmurs, which are typical pan-systolic murmurs. Now, you see, many murmurs can behave in that particular way, but you should have a very definitive answer that what are the 3 murmurs, what are the 2 murmurs that are classified. Then defining the murmurs is very important. As Dr. Ranjan very nicely said, the start and the end of the murmur. Like, a continuous murmur is what? The most important criteria is encompassing the S2, as he'll be discussing next week. So these are the things that one should be very, very clearly aware of. That how do you define early systolic, mid systolic, or a late systolic murmur? Then the concepts about the Austin Flint as very nicely done, that you have a diseased valve. So you should be very clearly aware that the chances of the person having with a very severe calcific mitral stenosis, the Austin Flint would not be there. How do you differentiate between Austin Flint, typical Austin Flint murmur, or a mitral stenosis murmur? There are 4 or 5 criteria: presence of opening snap, how they are, amyl nitrate would be different. So all these things you will be able to memorize not by just listening to the lecture, but after listening to the lecture, if you go and read and recapitulate yourself. I would suggest strongly, in my opinion, that start reading from Basics of Braunwald, the clinical cardiology and the Hertz. They very nicely describe all these parameters. Along with that, there are certain good books like Abraham's, like Jules Constant, or like, Aubrey Letham, and this other one I'll share, which are very good books for reading these clinical examinations. So these are my small suggestions to you. For especially all the residents who are now entering their 3rd year, let me again reiterate again and again that remember, you are caught on murmurs. What are the methods? Most of the time, how you describe these murmurs, oh, this is heard in the left parasternal area, or this is heard in the second intercostal space. No, there are very defined ways in which you completely describe the murmur. All these 7 parameters have to be taken care of along with the use of the dynamic auscultation also. So this is from my side. I would like to hear comments from Dr. Girish also. And there's one question that we'll be taking.
Yeah, let me congratulate Dr. Ranjan. As usual, you are excellent. Am I audible?
Yeah, very well. Very well. Perfect.
Hello?
Yeah, perfectly. You are audible. Absolutely.
Yeah, actually, there was some other disturbance. Okay. Ranjan, I think I should congratulate you on a very wonderful lecture. You made it look so simple. It's a complex topic. It is. There is no doubt about it, because this is one area which can make or break your career. Okay. And one or rather two questions which comes to my mind, Ranjan, is a lot of examiners are of the habit of or the students of the habit of describing diastolic murmurs grading and continuous murmurs grading. Actually, is there any grading system for diastolic and continuous murmurs?
I mean, typically, I think it's very individualistic, Dr. Girish. The people who want to grade diastolic murmur up to 4 and not 5, 6, continuous is usually graded like systolic. But I think you have to probably go with the flow. If examiner asks you better to grade, but only up to 4. But as we were discussing that probably grading is really overrated even for systolic murmur.
Absolutely.
It doesn't imply anything. Yeah.
Another question which comes to mind is any difference between the physiological murmurs and the functional murmurs?
Yes. That's probably where it's very, very important. Yes. So those physiological murmur traditionally should not have thrill. They have to be, in the sense they have to be early peaking. They can't be mid or late peaking because they're just functional murmur. Should be not more than grade 3 if you're used to grading, means should not have thrill, are generally softer, and there could be a postural variation also in these murmurs. Whereas abnormal murmur, any murmur with thrill is the traditional teaching is what are abnormal murmur. Any murmur with thrill is abnormal. Any murmur which is diastolic is abnormal. So, and any continuous murmur could go either way, but yes, they are also not normal to have. So that is probably the way to put it, physiological and pathological. But two exceptions, I think, for thrill in a functional murmur. One is MR, the MS murmur. Diastolic thrill is more common than systolic thrill in MR, because MR doesn't have thrill. One, because it's high pitch. Second, the jet of the blood is on the opposite direction.
Opposite side.
But it's more so because it's high pitch. High pitch don't have thrill. The second, in that, if you have an MDM, that MDM could have a thrill and it could still be functional. Then AR can produce a AS murmur, which is a functional AS. That also could have thrill and it could be grade 4. So unless you have a apicocarotid delay and other features, you will not be able to tell. In the third, I have not seen it happen, but the textbooks mention anemia actually can have thrill, the anemic flow murmur. If you read Brownwald and this one, it's actually mentioned that they could have thrill. I've not come across just anemia producing thrill anytime.
And sometimes even they say the venous hum in the neck can be auscultated as only a diastolic murmur in the chest. That is usually more common in children and maybe in CKD patients. Other than that, I don't think any other physiological murmur should be diastolic.
Another thing, Dr. Girish, you would remember that in one of these sessions with Dr. Suday Kumar, he asked a question and he threw a question, in fact, to all of us. And we were all quiet at that time. And he said that what are the phenomena of right-sided, which decrease with inspiration? You remember that, Girish? So I'm still, I didn't actually think about that. But Ranjan, do you have any answer or opinion for that? One thing is very interesting, you pointed out that an aortic click in a TOF. Actually left-sided phenomena that will actually increase with inspiration. This is what you said, right?
Yes,
because it is actually a part of this. Interesting to given a thought like that. So I'm not very well aware of the answer to what Suday's question would be, but it would be.
Was it not this one, the ejection click of the PS?
So the ejection click, it will decrease with
inspiration. The PS the valvular ejection click. The reason being that more blood in RA actually partially opens pulmonary valve. You can't do it to aortic valve because it is, the pressure difference is too much. In a PS, PA diastolic pressure is hardly anything. So pressure in RV actually inspiratory increase RV fluid can actually partially open the pulmonary valve.
So that click will decrease.
Click will decrease with that.
So that sounds good.
Another important point which was raised by Dr. Ranjan was the presence of paradoxical split in LVOT obstructions. So one of the important determinants is when you say that there is a clear-cut apicocarotid delay, that means your LV is ejecting late or long. Then that is the time when usually you have a P2A2, that is paradoxical split. So if you say that there is a significant aortic apicocarotid delay and don't say this paradoxical split, then you might be in a soup. So usually they go hand in hand.
Yes. And I think almost all cases have. Moment you have a significant AS,
yes.
Either it is single. Whatever you think a single is actually paradoxical. If you auscultate it a little carefully, you will elicit. You should be surprised if you don't have paradoxical split, not the other way around, that you picked up a paradoxical split. All these cases, invariably, in your mind, it should be paradoxical. Yeah.
Yes. Other thing, Mohit, what Dr. Sujay Kumar was telling, the murmurs of the right side, which don't increase on inspiration. That is right? That is the question, right?
No, he talked about the phenomena, which is the event that decreases with inspiration. This is what he said. I think probably I might be mistaken, but I think Ranjan very nicely answered and explained that there's the diastolic pressure is so low, so probably the answer is this one. Yeah, the pulmonary ejection click. We'll talk to him about that question. It's always good learning and always intriguing to, and it's a mutual growth. But I think it's a great talk. And I suggest all the residents must read, because these lectures are just supplementing your knowledge. They are there to, give you that impetus. Why we as doctors, as professors are also joining is because it's a learning exercise for all of us. Every time we are listening, we are learning to or strengthening our own old principles. And every person who comes here with is a great idea, good idea. So keep spreading knowledge, keep sharing knowledge. Thank you, Ranjan, for this fantastic talk.
I think Mohit, you can take the question there.
You can
in TOF, any change in murmur severity is there with respiration? This is one of the question which has come.
Yes. No, the RVOT is fixed. It doesn't vary with the RVOT itself doesn't vary, but the murmur could vary with respiration to some extent. It's still a right-sided phenomena. There is a Valsalva change which occurs in TOF. Even in TOF, it responds to Valsalva where the murmur actually comes down. So although RVOT doesn't change, functionally the murmur could change slightly. And as Dr. Mohit and we were discussing is, there is a there is a ejection which occurs even in aorta in this phenomena, and Parloff itself mentions that phenomena of aortic ejection click. In a passing statement, it mentions this point there. Aortic ejection click, inspiratory ejection click is seen. So there is some change which occurs in TOF. Condition which don't have any change is ASD actually, and to some extent even VSD doesn't change with the respiration, but ASD is the pure condition where you don't see. Most others you do see some respiratory change. There's one more question.
No, I think he's given the explanation for that.
Oh, okay.
Event in.
It was Dr. Sanjeev. So that is probably that Mohit picked it up right. That's the phrase.
So I think we must thank Dr. Ranjan and my colleagues who have joined here, all the resident fellows who take out their time to enjoy these sessions. And we'll be continuing with the section of murmurs next week, also probably in all probability. And after the session next week, we'll be taking a 1 week break. And then we will be restarting our session. So this is how it's going to be. To maintain the continuum, we'll try to wind off and request our dear friend Dr. Ranjan to, if he can probably spare out time, and we'll try to modify or according to adjusting his schedule. So thank Intas for providing us this great platform, and have a safe week, and we'll catch up on next Thursday, same time. Goodbye to all of you. Thank you so much.
Bye. Good evening.